Welcome to this video on Almost Professional Photoshop. Today we're going to be looking at what does the fox say and how to improve this composition. Let's begin. First, let's go ahead and take a look at dissecting this piece and figuring out everything that's going on with the piece. There's a lot of layers here. Kudos to that. There's lots of different adjustment layers, clipping masks, and this took some serious time to do, which I appreciate, and I think there's some things we can appreciate what was done well, and we can definitely improve on that a little bit as well. Photo filter, we have 4 sets of foxes. The fox is a little bit cool to begin with, so that fox needed to go ahead and be warmed up a little bit. Let's turn this layer on and off. It's definitely a little bit cool, so that's a good option, a good change. In changing it so it's cooler and changing some of the brightness and contrast. We're not necessarily darkening the side over here, which I think we definitely could darken probably a little more of this, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then we'll look at this option, fox here. The next fox is this one right here. The next fox, we'll go ahead and see where we're at. And we need to take this layer, and we've done a pretty good job of the cutout. Darkening the layer. Adding some warmth to it to help blend in. I think that warmth filter we actually reduced. Yeah, turn it on, and it actually gets less reduced. I think I would actually delete that one. I think that's one that can definitely help to get rid of. And this photo filter helps to warm it up. That's a good one. Keep that one. Another hue saturation. There's a lot of hue saturations. This one doesn't appear to be doing anything. Delete that one. That's darkening a little bit as well. One's a -5. One's a, okay, that's just a photo filter. Okay, maybe delete that one's not doing much. Maybe a little bit. Add some contrast, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I don't want it on the entire fox. I want to keep the light behind them. We're going to light it differently. And obviously, some of these foxes are shot in a different light, so we'll work on changing this piece up here a little bit. And then we have a mask layer here that's got a shadow to the fox. And I think what we did, yeah, we just added a drop shadow. When you think about shadow, a drop shadow is not the way to go. An effects shadow is just going to create this interesting form, but it's not going to actually cast where a real sunlit shadow would actually appear in reality, in nature, in the real world. So drop shadow, we'll just go ahead and trash that. I don't think that's going to be helpful at all. So we'll keep it from there. Next, let's go ahead and look at this one. Oh, I can see we have a hole in our fox. Someone shot its mouth out. That's not a good thing. We have some interesting dithering going on here. We'll try to reduce that a little bit. Some photo color that's really, really warm, almost radioactive warm. So we'll go ahead and maybe tweak that back a little bit. Not quite as dense. Maybe move it back a little bit. That one has some good things in terms of darkening the layers of the fox. Turn on some of that saturation. I think I'll turn up some of the saturation. I want some of the color there. I don't want it to be a black and white fox. But we need some things to improve on. That's okay. And then again, the drop shadow. The drop shadow has this weird dithering. It took me a little while when I was looking at this piece before and prepping for this video. Dissolve is on. I would not use the dissolve hardly ever. There's a few very rare exceptions, but dissolve is not one of my favorites. So I'm just going to just trash our effects because this is weird drop shadow. We'll paint in our own drop shadow. And then for our last of the 4th foxes, I think it's warming up a little bit. I might go a little more extreme. It doesn't seem to be doing a lot in warming them up. That's good. It's a darkening layer. I'm going to go ahead and darken the one side of him. And with my brush, go ahead and paint with a very nice large brush and a soft brush so you can't tell the edge. And turn it down a little bit just to keep the back of him here. The sun's coming from the left, and we're going to make the right darker. Something like that I think is a good thing. That helps. Same thing here. Turn it on this layer. Go ahead and turn that off of our fox. Going from there. And then same thing, drop shadow. I don't know where the drop shadow is going. There's a little bit of drop shadow. We're going to just trash that as well. Okay. So that's my layer. The biggest things are we need to hint at the direction. Now, not all the foxes have the right lighting, so it's going to be hard. We're going to have to kind of fake that as best we can. It's not going to be perfect because some of them are fairly front lit, and it's obviously back into the side lit from the trees. But we're going to go ahead and try to manipulate this, change this a little bit, one fox at a time. So on this piece here, zoom into fox number 1. Oh, that's a lot. This one's kind of in the clearing. There's not a lot of shadow from the trees, so we can kind of help in some ways. We can help maybe add a little more effects there. That's good. You see a kind of a hard edge here. I'm going to choose this brightness contrast layer. And I'm going to go ahead and paint black, maybe to kind of make them all dark for now. Then I'm going to go ahead and paint back some of that just to add a little bit of shadow because there is still some light coming to the left a little bit. I think that's good. Take our setting, maybe adjust contrast a little more. How about adjust it more? Change brightness brighter a little bit. Something like that. I think definitely helps. I'm also looking at my mask for the fox. The fox's tail is a little bit jagged. I'm coming with a nice small brush and start to paint some of that away. Just a little bit. Because it's in the distance, it could be a little hazy. We do need to add some shadow. We do need to add a little bit of shadow. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my drop effects shadow. And I'm going to go ahead and paint a new layer underneath him. Like that. And I can actually, because it's in isolated, I'm going to go ahead and create a clipping mask. I'm going to take my option here, create a clipping mask. I'm creating, instead of painting a layer, I'm going to go ahead and do an adjustment layer. So I'm going to create a new adjustment layer. Levels. Brighten up a bit. My levels right now is white. I'm going to go ahead and flip it, invert it. So now it's black. Now I'm going to go ahead and take and paint with a white brush over here in my options bar. Then I'm going to go ahead and take and flip to white. And now when I start to paint, it's going to change that effect. I actually went the wrong way. I need to darken this a little bit. So I'm going to go a darker option. Start to paint in my shadow. A little bit smaller. Got a big bushy tail, as course most foxes do. That's what people usually like about them. They're nice and cuddly and friendly. I don't know, maybe I have a fox as a pet. It's not my idea of a pet, but some people do. And I'm trying to replicate what the fox looks like in terms of his shape and his size and maybe his head, where an ear would look, something like that. That looks pretty good. Could maybe a little more intense maybe with that shadow. Nice thing is because it's an adjustment layer, it's really easy to change this in the future after it's all said and done. That helps. I'm also trying to darken this fox. So I'm going to go ahead and take my clipping mask here and create a new layer, call it curves, just to darken it out a little bit. Because I want to darken the right side. Take my curves. I'm going to take a black brush. And I'm going to go ahead and do something like that. Just subtly start to remove where the light's going to be. Something like that. The light's going to cast something like that. Okay, now it's a little bit drastic. I knew that, but I wanted for effect to see where it was. Take that up, bring it up a little bit in terms of lighting. About there. That's helping to make him blend more. The last step I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make it blur. Now I can right click here and go to convert to smart object. So I convert to smart object because I can see it's got this little symbol here, which means it's a smart object. Now I'm going to go ahead and go into my filter. I'm going to go to blur. I'm going to come up to Gaussian blur. And I'm going to blur it just a pixel or two. Maybe not even that much. It's already softened a little bit. Maybe half a pixel is plenty enough. But because he's a distance in the woods, by blurring him a little bit, that helps him look more like the blurry trees he's around. Because if he's around blurry trees, he's also going to be blurry if we shot this with a picture in real life. So we have to kind of think, if this was a picture, what would it do? Do I want the fox to be sharp? Well, maybe in a sense, but essentially, I want it to look realistic. So I've softened him just a little bit. Because it's a smart object, I can come back and I can adjust it later. I can say, I want to make it really blurry. I can adjust the settings, and now I'll have a really blurry fox. I don't want it that bad. Let's say I want maybe 1 pixel. Okay, 1 pixel is maybe where I want it. That helps to hide any imperfections as well. Let's move on to the next fox down the line. First, I'm going to take all these layers here of the fox, and I'm going to go ahead and create a group. I get the little group folder here, or I can hit Control G or Command G on a Mac, and I'll call it back fox, just to help keep me organized. I like that option. Go to my next layer, because this is now fox in the front. Something like that. I'm going to find my layers here. This is the fox from here to here. I'm going to group them right away. Call this the front fox. Like that. I think I'm going to just trash them to start over. It's sometimes easier to work with your own files a little bit. I think warming up helps a little bit for sure. Maybe I'll keep that one. I need to really darken this front side and brighten the other side. So I'm going to take my clipping mask, create a clipping mask here with the curves, and I'm going to crank it dark. Obviously, everything gets dark. I need to flip it or invert it. Go to my mask, invert. Come up here now with my brush, which is black. I'm going to go ahead and start to paint what I want to be dark. Where's the light falling? It's going to hit the side of the fox, the side of his left side here in the frame left. Something like that. Maybe a little bit of the back here, just the lights bouncing around in the trees. But a lot of that's going to be in the dark. Like that. Well, I'm maybe using this at a partial opacity brush just to partially remove it in there. And that's looking better already. Now it's too extreme, obviously. Also, it's not a clipping mask. So if you notice here closely, it's actually going onto the floor. I don't want that, so I need to right-click, make a clipping mask. Now that's done, it will actually paint this area. I don't have to worry about remasking or repainting the fox. That's really, really a time saver. Looks pretty good. Take my adjustment layer now and adjust it back. Maybe about like that. It's better. Now it's not going to be perfect because it wasn't shot right. It's going to be really hard to make it look perfect. Do another clipping mask for the brighter layers. Go up here. Oh, other way. Brighten it up a little bit. Need to make this a clipping mask so it's just to the fox, not the area around it. I have a clipping mask on the fox, and I'm going to go ahead and paint black where I don't want it. Where I don't want the layers, where I just darkened a lot of the layers, I had black, so I'm going to go ahead and paint that black really quick. And that's just helping add where the light's coming. Good. Looks better. A little more attention to the fox. This fox, I think we can keep sharp. We need to add a little bit of shadow. To create a shadow, I'm going to go ahead and add a layer underneath it. Clipping mask here, I'm going to go ahead and darken that quite a bit. Again, invert it, which is normal. I know for some people it maybe gets annoying. If you like it, say something in the comments. But I doubt too many people like watching some of the annoying parts. And I'm going to create a shadow. I need to figure out where is the light falling. I can follow the direction of this tree very nicely, which is great. I have an idea where the tree is falling, something like that. And the fox, the tail will be like that. Roughly his face is going to be in here. And that's good. Just going to create a little bit of shadow here. That looks pretty good. Maybe even have to go a little bit darker. At least for now, I can see where the layers are. Against that tree, it's hard to tell when it's that dark. Where is my layer? Something like that. Now also notice his leg will be casting the leg shadow on his leg. So I'll have to do a front shadow and a back shadow. Okay, it's looking better. Maybe not that as intense. Something like that. Adding a little bit of shadow is that critical part to make him belong in the scene. There's some deep shadows here. Maybe change the midtones a little darker as well. That's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to go here into the front of the fox, create a new one. Also do a darkening layer. Also go ahead and flip it. You're getting the idea. Now I'm going to take a white brush and I'm going to paint where the light's coming. It's also going to cast a little bit of shadow here. It's also going to cast some shadow on his foot. Shadow will be on the foot. This is back side is covering a little bit of the shadow. Something like that. I don't know if this is have to go that extreme. So that difference really does help. Kind of blend everything together. Now, if I want, I could make it a clipping mask so it doesn't appear to the areas like the trees and the foliage around him. So using a clipping mask, I think, is a good idea just to help darken him without necessarily darkening the rest of the scene. That looks pretty good. So I think that's a major improvement. Now on to fox number 3. This is the fox here. I'm going to name it middle left fox. Start to break it down. Need to add some shadow. The tricky part here is going to be taking his fur and adding the shadow of the tree. So I'm going to create a new layer here. Go to levels, crank it darker, and then need to paint back where that would be. So if I have shadow on him right now, where's the light falling? Well, I know it's probably not falling right here, just judging by the scene. Paint black on this portion. Okay, good. There should probably be some tree cast right about here, and the shadow's going to come in at a different angle because of the way it refracts around the curve of his body or her body, something like that. And I can put a little bit of shadow. I think I'm going to keep it the face there. Put a little shadow from there. And let's say there's a little bit of shadow in here. It maybe is actually cutting a little bit of that tail. Now we can actually lighten up that. How big is that tree? It's hard to say necessarily. That looks pretty good. It's curving and wrapping around the curve of her body. So where that tree is going to be falling, something like that. Maybe not quite as intense as shadow. The shadows are pretty intense in this place. Maybe turn the midtones a little bit darker. I think that helps. So darken that a little. Oh, draw in blue somehow. Blue in there. Notice we have the hole in the fox's mouth. How do I fix that? Well, I can actually find the fox's lair. Go to the fox's lair. No, not where he's living. The fox's lair. Have the subject number 2 on this mask here. I'm going to go ahead and paint in here white. As long as we did our job correctly. Oh, got the wrong layer here. The wrong fox. Click the right fox. Paint white in his mouth. Her mouth is now brought back in, just like that. Super slick. Go ahead and touch out a little bit of the tail. Need some touch out work. That looks pretty good. That's a big deal. That's a big difference here overall. And the fox is good. We need to cast the shadow, so I'm going to create a back shadow. I want a clipping mask. I want to blow the shadow. Flip it. Now I'm going to paint white to get my shadow. So where is this fox going to be appearing? Make it a little more intense there for my shadow so I can see it for now. The shadows will come here. We see his legs up in the air. This one's going to be coming in here. We have some shadow coming here. The fox's head's going to be coming somewhere like this. The body will be coming in here. Even behind this layer, but right now I don't have his clipping mask, so I don't want to paint on his ear. Something like there. And that's kind of a rough outline of what the shadow will look like. Darkening that down quite a bit. Looks pretty good. Maybe even putting a little bit of shadow on its face. No, I don't always do that in blue. It's changing interestingly to blue. That's interesting. I'm a little bit puzzled by it as well. And that's looking pretty good. Much better. Probably should also create one layer on top of the fox, just to add a little bit of darkening in some of the edges. Not everywhere, but in some of these edges need some darkening. So I'm going to take this layer here. I'm going to go ahead and paint underneath here to kind of darken up some of that tail. It's going to be in the shade, the way the light's hitting. Light's also probably going to not hit all the leg. So it's kind of shadow up parts of this leg and here as well. And where the light isn't falling, just because the body's blocking parts of it, the bottom of her mouth, something like that. The larger the brush, the softer the feather. It's a big deal when you get into masking to make it look realistic. The larger the brush, the softer the shadow. Oh, I don't want that one. I don't want to darken that paw. But now, starting to add some shape, some dimension, some believability. We all know it's fake. Much of stuff in life is fake nowadays in Photoshop. But that's starting to add. Now it was a little intense. I can tone that back down a little bit. But I think that helps make a big difference to our fox. Close that one up. Now go to our last fox. Group that in. Middle right fox. Now to go find our middle right fox. Here it is. This one needs a lot of work. He's not in a lot of shade. We don't have a lot of trees hitting it, but I do need to darken that right side of the picture. So I'm going to create his layer here, do a new layer of curves, darken it out a lot, like crazy dark. Come to my curves layer. Go ahead and I'm going to paint, there it again, paint black to bring some light back to this beautiful fox. Even turn back the opacity a little bit so I can do it gradually. A little bit of light hitting the beautiful tail, the legs, the bod. When you're staring at the face of a demigod. Don't know where that came from. That layer right there makes a big difference. Maybe a little bit intense in the darkening. I can maybe tone it back a little bit. Well, that layer really, I think, was the linchpin, making him more believable. Really made a big difference there. Okay, that looks good. Now we need to add a mask, a little bit of shadow, because he's kind of floating in the mix of this bright foliage, which is not going to happen. So I'm going to go to my, right here, create a new blank layer, move it below my fox, go back to my black brush. I hit D, it actually gives me black and white by default. For some reason, I have this blue that's been floating around all lesson. Paint in a little bit darker, something like that. And you can see some of this kind of looks naturally in there. This dark spot in here looks like it could be naturally done that way. Something like that. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to do one more layer on top of the fox just because I can. Just to darken the layer, a little more shadow layer. Invert it. Now I'm going to go ahead and paint white just to bring back a little bit of darkness because there's going to be more intense shadow on the bottom of this fox. It also hides the imperfections that he's not really there in the scene. So sometimes you do things because it's good and it needs it. Other times you do it maybe a little more intense because it just helps you to hide your imperfections, to hide the fact that it's not real. And that's one of these right here, something like that. Maybe a little bit darker here. Maybe some tree, darken a little bit, creating some dimensionality, larger brush, softer feather. Oh, gorgeous. Maybe not quite as intense in the light. Make it up a little bit. And boom, there we have it. So let's go ahead and take a look at, oh, that layer looks really fake on that tree. I think we need to adjust that layer on the middle fox there a little bit on his layer that's on top of the fox. I think that's the right idea. I think we just did it a little bit too heavy-handed. Maybe reduce, I don't think there's necessarily two trees there. Let's go ahead and reduce one of them. Something like that. I think that's better. Okay. So we have in our layers here, before and after. That fox shadow is a little bit intense. Let's bring that not quite as intensely into the shadows there. So let's take what we got. between here's the original and here's the edit. So here's the original and here's the edit. Those changes, they're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but they're helping to make these foxes look like they actually belong. So what does the fox say? Good question. We may never know. Thanks for watching this version of Almost Professional Photoshop. Keep taking pictures. We'll see you next time.